Spread the fire, feed the mind, break the chains. Welcome to another guest analysis episode of SMWX. And this particular episode is a wrap-up of the first sitting of Parliament, where we saw the election of various officials and where we saw the election of the president taking place. So let's recap. Let's think about where we are now and what this means going forward for South Africa. So, best case scenario, the coalition that we're seeing now between the Democratic Alliance and the ANC, and make no mistake about it, it is a Democratic Alliance and ANC coalition. The best case scenario is that you get the best of both worlds. You get the ANC being able to push some very progressive and socialist policies to the benefit of the public. We've seen the ANC increase the minimum wage. We've seen the ANC advocate for an NHI. We've seen the ANC try to create various reforms that are to the benefit of the majority of South Africans. So in a best case scenario, you have the ANC doing all of that, removing members of the ANC who have been implicated in corruption. We've already seen the arrest of Zizi Godwa. We've already seen the arrest of Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula. So these kind of things can actually become a positive, allowing the ANC to renew itself while maintaining its gains from a progressive front. On the DA side, you may be able to get the good governance management side of the spectrum, which the Democratic Alliance has been able to lead with in the Western Cape. There is a difference in terms of quality of service delivery, even in the affluent areas between Western Cape and Gauteng and also KwaZulu-Natal. That's the best of both worlds, where the DA is also able to mitigate some of the largesse which we have seen, the corruption that has happened in the tender processes. So having them in the cabinet may actually give South Africa the best of both worlds, leading to this positive coalition nation. So that's one scenario of what could happen in the coming weeks, in the coming months, in the coming years. But there's also a worst case scenario, and we have to consider both. What could be the worst case scenario? Number one, the worst case scenario could be where the Democratic Alliance and ANC have ideological differences and nothing happens in that particular cabinet in terms of new legislation being proposed. Because Section 19, I think, of that particular coalition deal says that there needs to be an agreement between parties that represent 60% of the electorate in the National Assembly, effectively meaning that you need to have the ANC and the DA agree. Otherwise, if they don't agree, you're not going to be able to see any new legislation coming in. This idea of sufficient consensus could lead to gridlock. You could also have a problem with egos. Let us not forget that John Steenhuisen has got what many would describe as a prickly personality. We've seen him berate journalists. We've seen him act in ways that didn't have diplomacy or tact in a variety of ways. So that could become a challenge. Or what we could see is consensus on things such as mass privatization of infrastructure, but no consensus on anything else. The DA manifesto and the ANC manifesto do have synergy on privatization of network infrastructure, which would include water, which would include electricity, which would include Transnet. So in a worst case scenario, what you then see is some of the ugly sides of Cape Town. Because if you speak to people who live in Khayelitsha, who live in Langa, who live in the Cape Flats, where the Western Cape does govern and oversee, they do not see a lot of the benefits that are seen in Sea Point, that are seen even in City Bowl, that are seen in the most affluent parts of Cape Town. So a worst case scenario is a scenario where you have egos, where you have gridlock, where you have pushing of budget cuts at the expense of development in the areas that need it, at the expense of cuts in the public service. Make no mistake about it, the South African public service is still a necessary arm of the government, and if you reduce its size and you start outsourcing to the private sector more responsibilities and roles, all that does is it creates more costs for the average South African who is already struggling with the cost of living. So that is the worst case scenario. What happens in that worst case scenario as well is that you could end up having a breakdown of this coalition. What are the risks that exist to this coalition? Whether it's a best case or worst case scenario, one of the risks, we already saw it coming from the floor today, from one of the issues that was raised by Floyd Shivambu, and that is the issue of Phala. Right now, Parliament may be able to delay deliberating on Phala, but there is a case that is at the Constitutional Court as things stand. We're getting the results now. So let's see what happens. Let's see who won between Julius Malema and Cyril. This is the moment that we spent all night waiting for. This is the moment that the last year has been about. This is the moment. I think you know the result, but still, it's still a moment in history. So let's see. Let's see how it plays out. He's about to make his announcement.
Honorable members, I've now received a written report from the returning officer. The result of the ballot is as follows. The total number of ballot papers issued is 339. The total number of ballot papers counted is 339. The total number of spoiled to invalid ballot papers is 12. And the candidates' votes are as follows. Honorable J.S. Malema, 44 votes. Honorable MC Ramaphosa, 283 votes.
The Phala matter is not going away. It was raised today. It's coming from the courts. The ANC in and of itself is not united. They're singing today, but there are many people within the benches of this parliament who are looking at that number one spot, who also want that number one spot. So let's leave it here today, and I'm going to put it to you. What do you think is going to happen? How long do you think this coalition is going to last? How long do you think the unity in the ANC is going to last? How many more months does President Ramaphosa have? Is he going to finish his term? What do you think? Let's have a conversation. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We are going to be following the next 100 days, keeping you abreast on all of the things that happen. We're going to be looking forward to which ministries the different parties get. It's all going to be critical. Celebrations today for the ANC, despondency for the EFF, despondency for the MK. We're going to leave it there today. Yeah.